The conspiracy people are right. The name Jesus has only existed for a few hundred years, and this has led to some pretty crazy ideas and weird theories. What? Ken's agreeing with conspiracy people? Well, not really. Let's dig into Jesus' name and get to the truth using hard facts. Now, we're getting ready to race through 2,000 years of translation and transliteration, so buckle up. Jesus' name in Hebraic Aramaic is Yeshua, which derives from to rescue, to deliver, or most commonly, he saves. And Yeshua was most likely shortened from Yehoshua, which means Jehovah is salvation, with Yehoshua often translated as Joshua. So Yehoshua in Hebrew literally means God saves, and Yeshua is the shortened version. And in the first century, Yeshua was a very common name, especially in Galilee. And early writers of the Gospels were faced with a bit of conundrum because when converting Yeshua's name to Greek, the original composers and translators of the New Testament ran into mega problems because there is no Y in Greek, nor is there a sh sound. So, as was common when writing of Yeshua, his name became transliterated, meaning Greek writers put together letters in an attempt to make a similar sound. In this case, the use of iota, eta, and sigma to get the sh sound. So, a generation later, when seeing this spelling written down, a Greek hero would pronounce what was known as Yeshua as something that sounded like Yeshua. But another big problem with transliterating Yeshua into Greek is that masculine Greek names never, ever, never ended in a vowel sound. Those that did were given the letter S, sigma, as a suffix. And this was a cultural tradition that came from the fact that the name of the Greek god Zeus ended with sigma, and it's why in the New Testament names such as Judah become Judas, and why Kepha becomes Kephas. So Yeshua needed to become Yesuas, or it just wouldn't make any sense in Greek culture and thus Greek writing. And the next problem is that the two vowel sounds before the S do not flow and are non-existent in Greek. So the last vowel was dropped, again very common, leaving us with Iesus. And this is the closest a Greek-speaking person could come to transliterating the name Yeshua. And why within a generation or two, when people speaking of Jesus in the Greek-speaking world who were not really familiar with Hebrew or Aramaic phonetics wouldn't call Yeshua, Yeshua. They wouldn't know him as that. So Yeshua became known as Jesus to the Greek-speaking world for 400 years, with the name Yeshua losing 75% of its sound. The last bit of its original sound was found in the U sound. But then when Greek texts began to be translated into Latin, the transliteration of Jesus became Jesus. And this is how Yeshua's name was known for roughly the next 1,000 years. There are a few shifts in there with a few translators such as Wycliffe and Tyndale, but it doesn't really depart from the overall narrative. So when did the J come in? Why do we call Yeshua Jesus instead of Jesus? Well, in the European world, the letter J wasn't really a thing until fairly recently, like really recently in the grand scheme of language. Why? Because again, there was no J letter in ancient Latin. J was a late addition to the Latin alphabet made during the Renaissance. And in English, there was no J in super common use either. But as language evolved, which is what languages do, and especially during what's called the Great Vowel Shift during the period of what's called Late Middle English, the letter J finally came to be distinguished from I. And you can actually thank a Frenchman named Pierre Ramus in the mid-1500s for that. But J still wasn't common in English until the early 1600s. See, kids, in college, I never thought studying Middle English for 2 years and Latin for 4 years would come in handy. But here we are 25 years later, actually using what I originally went to university for. About time! Even in the first publications of the King James Version from 1611, Jesus was still spelled Jesus, just like Jehovah was spelled Yehovah. Joseph was Yosef, blah, blah, blah. But in 1629 and 1638, the Cambridge revisions of the 1611 King James were convened to correct over 1,500 simple publication errors of the original 1611 King James Bible. And it was in these revisions that J was introduced into the physical spelling of Jesus' name. In fact, the first mass published book in English to make a defined distinction in writing between I and J was the Cambridge revision of the King James Bible in 1629. And after that, it kind of like caught fire because the Cambridge revisions were used to teach English grammar rules and heavily influenced other educational books at that time. And by the mid-1600s, what was once Yeshua was now officially Jesus. No conspiracy, no Illuminati nonsense or anything like that. Ask any linguist. This is how multiple translations, pronunciations, and language over a 2,000-year period works. Languages change. Spellings evolve. In fact, to believe that there's only one way to say Jesus' name is pretty arrogant, as Jesus' name is pronounced and spelled differently in over 90 different languages. But here's the fact, as a missionary who has traveled the world and has heard Jesus' name spoken in many, many different languages, you can call him Jesus, Yeshua, Yehoshua, Jesus. It doesn't matter. All it matters is that you call on him, that you develop an intimate relationship with him, that you understand that he loves you deeper than you could ever imagine. So next time you hear someone spout conspiracy nonsense about Jesus' name, forward them this so they can see linguistically the facts behind Yeshua became Jesus. God bless.